All right, so if you look at the first couple of weeks of the Big 12, look at what we have. The best win, if it's not Texas, Alabama, which it most likely to me, there's no question it was, which game or first 2 weeks perhaps had the best win other than UT in their win in Tuscaloosa?
That's tough. I'm very biased on that one. I think FSU over LSU was a big win. I think Miami over A&M.
I was talking about the Big 12.
Oh, Big 12. Sorry. The Big 12 was the best win. I don't know. There haven't been a lot of slobber knockers yet. I mean, the TCU had a very prominent loss, but I don't know who's had a big win yet.
Yep, I know. Yeah, Craig.
I think it's a situation where there's not really a lot of great candidates to choose from here. I mean, through 2 weeks, I guess Kansas over Illinois would possibly be one of those.
I agree.
Outside of that, though,
it's been
few
kind
and far between. I mean, there's not been a lot of big games for one. And there's just not a lot of those that they've won, those types of big games. I mean, Texas Tech having the opportunity against Oregon, Baylor having the opportunity against Utah, Iowa State having the opportunity against Iowa, West Virginia against Penn State. You know what? Cincy over Pittsburgh.
There you go.
Although I'm not sure how good Pittsburgh is, though. I mean, that's the thing is I don't know how good they are, but as far as a name goes.
At Pittsburgh, too.
Yeah, that would be one, and the rivalry factor there. I think the fact that Cincinnati's not getting a whole lot of respect, at least early on, that one I think would have to be thrown in there as well. Houston over UTSA, even though I'm not sure how good UTSA is, and I don't know that Houston's all that good either. I mean, let's be honest about the situation. There's really not appearing to be many great teams or teams that are, potentially going to be great. I think you look at it right now, Texas is clearly the most impressive team as far as what they've done because they beat Alabama. Kansas State is steady, and we know and we think they're going to be very good along the way. But and what they've done has been good. It's just that they haven't had the big marquee game to sit there and really show themselves to the world, right? But we assume that they're good, and we think they're good based on what we've seen. And then Oklahoma, I think we think is better than they were last year, which is not saying a ton, but they seem to be better and seem to have a bit of a different swagger about them. And then beyond that, I think it's a huge question mark about who's who and kind of how you all put it together. And I think there's even questions about Oklahoma still, and there's still questions about K-State. But, yeah, I think Texas and then K-State, you feel really good about that. And then, for me, I think Oklahoma probably in that 3 spot. But honestly, I think it's just a huge gob of just teams that are sitting right there.
And, Smoak, your question kind of brings up a larger issue that I wonder when the scheduling, of course, there's going to be more teams, so they're not going to be able to avoid this, really. The Big 12 has done this thing where, they don't get into the conference season until the first 3 weeks are over. And very rarely have they played early conference games.
Like this weekend with TCU and Houston.
Yeah, exactly.
A week early.
It's a week early. And the other conferences tend to sometimes play conference games early, right off the bat, or that are big rivalries, or maybe middle, not the biggest rivalry of the year, but each team's second biggest game of the year might be the first one out of the gate. And then when you have Baylor and Utah played week 2, and that should have been a good non-conference game. It wound up not being as big of a deal, probably nationwide as it could have been because Baylor lost the week before, but the Big 12 maybe needs to start doing what the other conferences do.
They used to.
Have some big marquee games up there at the front.
I don't know what year it was. It was in the 90s. Texas Tech, I think, and Nebraska opened up a year to start the year. Tommy Frazier in Nebraska back in the mid-90s. And so there have been games, and I think that's a good idea. Slide one in or 2 or 5 in the first couple of weeks. And Craig, you brought it up. Houston and TCU, a conference game that will be coming up this weekend. Dana Holgerson against Sonny Dykes, and 2 teams that have a loss on their schedule. TCU, of course, helped launch Dion and Colorado, and then also Houston with the loss last week to Rice.
Yeah, and so Houston, I mentioned having, I guess, one of those nicer wins on paper, just name-wise against UTSA, but then turning right around and getting beat by Rice is not a good look. So I don't know how good they really are. They could very well be 0-2. They're not. They're 1-1. But yeah, that's one of those teams that you could place them in a lot of different places up and down the, anywhere from, I guess if you wanted to, 4 to 14. Although I think they're far more closer to 14 than they are to 4. And you could do the same with a lot of other teams at this point. I mean, it's a situation where you're doing power rankings, and it's hard to kind of separate the majority of the conference. So we'll get to see some separation. I mean, starting this weekend, I don't know if that'll be the case so much, but we will at least get one conference game in, and we'll see TCU Houston, and then it's off to the races, and we'll get to see the whole shebang moving forward, which I'm very much looking forward to.
More than half the conference is 2-0. I know that there are some hickeys on some of the resumes, and obviously UCF and what happens with them now, with Plumlee out for what will be 2 or 3 weeks based on what Gus Malzahn also has been reported. But I think Cincinnati's winning at Pittsburgh, winning that game. They opened up with a blowout of Eastern Kentucky because they were one of those schools when everyone looked at it. Now they have Miami, Ohio, but then they have Oklahoma in their first Big 12 game in a couple of weeks. They're entertaining Oklahoma. UCF, of course, gets to open up their Big 12 at home and among others. But I would think Cincinnati, to me, is one because of that win at Pittsburgh relative to what we find out about Pittsburgh. But the fact they beat Pittsburgh on the road, to me, was very impressive. All right, now, if you look around the landscape of college